haven't we all learned that we can't predict anything at this point?
Yeah, we don't know.
Everyone's like frothing at the mouth, waiting for the real estate market to crash. And it's like 10 years later.
It's still there.
Still there.
But that's what I miss the most. I miss the walkability. I miss being able to walk out of my door and go get a coffee.
I love New Kent, but I hate it. I love having no one around me to do whatever. But sometimes at 2 a.m. when I got the munchies, I want to order some freaking Taco Bell, and I can't. So it really sucks.
Jesus.
I mean, how else are you going to afford a house in California?
Yeah. I'll tell you how.
Actually,
you
I'm
leave.
curious. They've all left.
There's nothing here.
Yeah.
You walk out the door, and you need a bulletproof vest.
Yeah,
but like
not great.
I see that all the time.
Yeah.
So
So location, like most things to do with real estate, location with Airbnb matters, right?
Anybody that's sitting around waiting for like a residential housing crash,
it's just never gonna happen.
It's not anytime soon.
Yeah.
And certainly never to a level like what we saw in 2008.
Yeah.
That's just not gonna. It's not a reality.
Welcome to the Think Fresh, Move Forward podcast. And today's podcast, we have a guest today, Daniil Kleyman.
That's me.
Real estate developer. We're excited to pick your brain a little bit on that space, which I think is an interesting one. So tell us a little bit first about your background and how you got into this. I'm curious to learn your story a little bit.
Sure. So in my previous life, I worked in finance in corporate America, worked in New York City. Kind of got into it almost by accident. Just I studied finance in college.
You can pull us a little closer there.
I studied finance in college.
The mic if you
there you go.
I just don't want to kiss the mic. There we go.
Yeah, you got Deadpool hanging off right there.
Is this better?
Yeah,
Okay.
Perfect.
So, I went to college. I studied finance. A bunch of Wall Street firms came on campus, recruited people. I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grow up, so I got a job in New York. I just wanted to be in New York City. I wanted to get out of Virginia, get back to living in the big city. So I got a job in finance in New York. Worked there for 6 years. I liked it, but I didn't like it. I didn't really like having a job. We were working on some interesting deals, but I was always kind of interested in real estate, and I was interested in working for myself. I didn't really know how or what I was going to do. And then recession of 2008 happened, and the decision was kind of made for me by my company. The investment bank I was working for went out of business. I got laid off, and I figured, hey, this is a good time as any to kind of go into business for myself.
Yeah.
I didn't have a family at the time. I didn't have any responsibilities. Didn't have any bills. So moved back to Virginia. Now I had to get away from the big city.
And you were what, in your 30s at this point, or was that?
No, I was 28.
28.
So I was 28.
That's about the time, that's like,
Yeah.
when I turned 30, that was like my moment of oh my gosh, what am I doing with the rest of my life, and made a total pivot to fresh move. So I'm with that. I think there's something about that age, right?
Well, I think, you can take risks when you're in your 20s.
Yeah.
Once you got a family and you've got kids to support, it becomes a lot harder to do weird stuff that may or may not pan out.
Yep.
So that was a good time for me to
start a crypto mining farm.
Start a crypto mining farm. Exactly.
I don't recommend that.
There's all kinds of wacky ideas that people have tried, but hey, if you're young and you can take the risk, why not?
Totally.
So, yeah, I left corporate America. I came back to Virginia, and I started just buying single family houses. I wasn't really interested in flipping so much as I was in just building a portfolio of rentals from the very beginning. So I started acquiring single family houses, renovating them, adding them to the rental portfolio. Slowly moved into, a little bit larger properties, duplexes, quads, and just kind of organically progressed to ground up development.
And so on that, so this was like long-term renting, right, out of the gate, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Did you, was it personal financing as far as financing those deals, or did you?
So we would use private lenders on the short-term side.
Okay.
And then when the property was renovated, when it was leased out to a tenant, I would refi it with a local community bank, pay off the private lender, then go and do it again. And, part of it was just great timing. I got into the market, really I started buying in early 2009.
Oh, yeah.
So bottom of the market.
I mean,
yeah, you rode that sucker.
Listen, I love to take all the credit for whatever success I've had to date, and say I had an amazing vision and great execution. But fact is, like, you could have bought anything back in 2009 and just held it to now, and you'd be doing well.
Damn,
Yeah.
I was
Right.
19.
Too young.
Too young.
Sounds like you invented the Burr method.
Yeah, I seriously doubt that I invented the Burr method, but I mean, out of the people that I knew at the time, there wasn't a whole lot of people doing it. So it was a great way to acquire properties, because back then you could buy foreclosures, you could buy them way below replacement cost, you could still appraise them high enough to where you could, once they're renovated, you could refi, get all the money out. Last couple of years, it's a lot harder to do because you're buying properties at a much higher basis.
Yep.
So it was, the timing was phenomenal. If I could go back to 2009 with a couple of extra $1 million and buy up some more real estate, I mean, my God, it was an amazing time.
How much did your properties appreciate when you refinanced it with a tenant? Was that a factor when you came from a private lender to a lender when you're trying to refinance the property?
The appreciation was created through the renovation.
Okay.
Right. So that's where it's called sweat equity. You're basically forcing appreciation. So at the time, we were able to get high enough appraisals to where the loan that I'm now taking out pays me back for the purchase of the property. The renovation pays off my private lender. So now I own this asset with no money into it. It's cash flowing.
Wow.
I mean, yeah. So, the first chunk of my portfolio, I was able to essentially build with the same chunk of private money. We just took it from one deal to the next, to the next, to the next. And before I know it, I had
That was a
20,
good tax
30 units.
break too, because you're taking that.
You're refinancing
Yeah.
tax-free.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no capital event.
Wow.
And the bank likes it because there's a tenant, so it's cash flowing, so money's coming in, correct?
Correct. And at the time, flipping was risky. There wasn't the retail market wasn't really there. So this was a much safer model from a financing perspective. And yeah, it worked great. So.
And is there anything that someone could glean from that unique situation, right? Obviously, timing is everything, right, in that industry. So is there anything that you saw then that still applies to today relating to, because obviously we're in a high interest rate environment, right? We're in a, obviously the
But is
prices.
it high though? Comparative?
Well, I mean,
compared to what we're used to over the last 10
Right,
years,
true.
yeah, it's the difference is now you've got a high cost of money and you've got a high cost of real estate.
yeah.
And you've got a high cost of construction. If real estate is cheap, money is expensive, you can probably still make numbers work a lot better. So, can you execute bird deals now? Yes, you have to buy at the right price. It's harder to find deals that you can buy cheap enough to where you can fully refinance out all the cash that you have into it. There are certain markets that are probably neglected still around the country, and I'm not an expert in other markets. I know our market.
Sure. Yeah.
I would have to think there are some markets where you could still execute these deals successfully. More often than not now, you can still do these deals, but you're leaving some cash tied up.
Yeah.
Right? And
Yeah.
so in our new development business, we're leaving money tied up in these deals.
Yeah.
There's just the numbers don't work to where I can buy the land, build it, and then refi and get all my cash out.
Yeah.
It's just the numbers.
So
don't work
longer
that way.
term strategy generally at this point. Yeah.
Of course.
And is there? When did you make the pivot to multifamily? Right, because you're in the multifamily space now, or is that?
I'm in multifamily mixed use.
Yeah, mixed use. Yeah.
Have you kept most of your single family properties, or you sell them?
I still have most of them.
Okay.
Yeah, I every couple of years I like to do the 80-20 analysis where I look at, there's always going to be 80% of your problems are going to come from 20 or
Pareto's
even
principle,
10% of your properties. So
Yeah.
every couple of years I like to kind of cull and get rid of the problem ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy to do. Like, hey, this is where all of our maintenance calls are coming from. This is where, all of our problem tenants are. And as I've done that over the last 6-7 years, like, life has gotten much easier from a property management perspective. But most of the houses I still own. My tax bill for selling them right now would be so horrific. It would just be so ugly. There's a little duplex I bought, where Alamo Barbecue is in Churchill.
Mm-hmm.
I bought the duplex for $75,000. I put in about 30 into it. So I'm into it for about 110. It'll appraise for $475 right now.
Wow. Wow.
Well, yeah. Welcome to 2009.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it cash flows like a madman. But if I sold it right now between capital gains and depreciation recapture, my tax bill would be awful.
Yeah, the only way to get around that was to roll it into another property. Right?
Yeah, but there's so few truly, people. A lot of people that are doing 1031 exchanges now
Yeah.
are, in my humble opinion, are rolling their money over into deals that they're overpaying for, and that's always seemed silly to me. You're gonna
And
you-
for our listeners, what is a 1031 exchange? Is that your
it
tax
allows you
form?
to defer capital gains and depreciation recapture if you take a property that if it's a property that would generate long-term capital gains. You sell that property, you roll all the proceeds into a similar property. It needs to be a like kind property.
So you can't take that from a single tenant to a multi-tenant, or is that
You can. That's still considered like kind. Yeah.
Well, what would it be a like kind property?
Like a commercial building. for
You know,
example.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know where it breaks. Like, I don't know if you go from a multifamily to industrial, for example, or office. I'm not an expert on 1031 exchanges. I've done them once, but even when we did it, we did it from duplexes into land, and because we rolled the money over into land, I deferred my capital gains, but not depreciation recapture. So it gets a little bit tricky. But
Yeah, you're starting to get way over my head there with that last part.
Yeah.
But
the overarching point is that if you are buying something and overpaying for it by 50 grand to save 40 grand in taxes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
Not-
the difference
worth it.
paying
Right.
short-term capital gains versus long-term capital gains, sure you're saving, but yeah, it's like the opposite of dollar cost averaging, right? Like
Well,
you're buying something
sometimes
higher.
you just take the hit, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I've personally seen people do 1031 exchanges where to avoid paying, again, 50 grand in taxes, they're going to roll their money over into a property that they're overpaying for by 80 grand,
yeah.
right?
Doesn't make sense.
And it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, sure,
Somebody's getting paid. You're
I mean,
still
yeah,
losing money.
you're sticking it to Uncle Sam,
Yeah,
sure,
yeah.
that year. but-
Abolish the IRS.
Yeah. Oh, careful. The
The algorithm.
Content
Watch
moderator.
that algorithm. Gosh, man.
YouTube's listening.
oh, they won't like that one.
I'm sure they actually might like that one too. Just saying.
Oh
Anyways,
man.
Actually, yeah, they probably would. Okay.
So yeah, okay. So that's really interesting. I mean, obviously there's some complexity to anything in that space, but tell me a little bit about mixed communities, right? Like mixed residential, commercial, right? Obviously that was like a trend that started taking off. What we
Mhm.
started seeing like 10 years ago, I guess, or I guess before that too. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, I don't know, when did we start kind of moving back from people flock into suburbia back to inner cities. I mean,
Mhm.
that probably happened in 2000s,
yeah.
right? Probably before the recession.
Yep.
I think it's accelerated since then. I think ultimately that will never change. People, especially younger people, want to be in walkable, amenitized communities.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
So-
suburbia is going to die in the next 20 years.
if you look at the development patterns in a lot of the suburbia, it's in a lot of places it's moving towards density.
Yeah, like the 15-minute walkable city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, large apartment buildings with street level retail. Some of it is executed well. Some of it is, if you go out to like Short Pump, is executed poorly.
Yeah.
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 But
That's where I
What-
live, by the way. The parking
Well, at
is
least not
terrible.
Houston,
right?
Houston,
What makes-
Infrastructure.
What makes it poorly? I'm just curious.
well, so go out to Greengate, for example, and they don't have a multifamily component in Greengate, but they have a lot of townhomes.
Mm-hmm.
And then they have retail, but everything is oriented towards parking. So the kind of
Yeah.
mixed use that we typically do will be retail and residential above it, or in the back of it. It's in one building, it's in one development. If you look at what they're doing out there, you've got these pad sites that are fronting Broad Street, and then a sea of parking around them, and they've got townhomes in the back.
Yeah.
And they bill it as a walkable mixed-use community, but in reality, for you to live in one of those townhomes and schlep to one of those restaurants, you're probably still going to end up driving. So it's not truly walkable from that
Gotcha.
perspective.
Yeah.
You can always live in Houston, Texas.
I've never been.
It's the worst city in the United States to walk.
Oh,
Well,
is it really?
We've been.
Yep.
I spoke to Buckley, previous guest. He said that it can take an hour to get from one end of Texas to another end of Texas.
Oh yeah,
Sorry, not Texas. Sorry, Houston.
Houston.
yeah.
It's like
Walking or driving?
Sorry, driving. It's
Yep.
literally like us driving to Northern Virginia.
Yeah.
That's like going from one side of Houston to the other. That's how
it's
big
massive.
Well, it's
Houston
just
is.
sprawling, right?
It's just-
Yeah.
They have like a 13-lane highway. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean everything is car oriented.
Yep.
There's kind of a movement out there, and I got the guy's book called Strong Towns, if you guys ever read up on it. And that's all they talk about. They advocate for walkable, mixed use communities, moving away from transit, not transit, but car oriented development.
Mhm.
You know, replacing parking lots with buildings that actually produce taxable revenue. There's far more to it. I'm probably doing a poor job describing it, but like that's what people want now.
Yeah,
And
the,
so
the
you're
trend
seeing,
kind of changed after the world stood still for a couple years.
yeah,
So a lot of streets are just. So I think Chicago has a couple of streets that just never reopened them,
mhm.
and now it's just restaurants just have open patio right on the road now, and there's a couple of streets in
Mhm.
New York that haven't reopened roads just because of it. So it's very interesting to see how things have changed since then.
they're pushing for the same thing in Carytown here.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Oh
if-
yeah,
I don't know if
Cary
it'll
Street,
happen.
Cary
maybe.
Street?
Yeah,
Yeah, total
yeah,
sense.
going to just purely walkable down Cary
Yeah.
Street. Yeah,
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
make total sense.
My opinion is like, have you been to San Antonio, like Riverwalk?
I have.
Do you like that? What's your opinion of that?
I mean, it's not authentic, right? It's too many tourists, and that's the experience I had, was like a tourist experience. So, but
But it was busy.
We had a good time. It was very busy. Yeah.
But like the river, but the thing like with the James, like here, there's just like nothing. I remember
It's
like
dead. Yeah.
it's dead. Like I remember they wanted to almost mimic that feel, and they have not done anything
Mm-mm.
downtown.
There's a lot of environmental stuff that
No, it's
zoning and
just
stuff on the
downtown.
river.
What's your opinion of downtown political corruption in the Richmond government?
Oh, jeez.
Jeez,
Uh,
is that 15 minutes yet?
well, I've got to be
Wow.
careful. I mean, I still
Yeah.
got to do business there.
Yeah.
There's a commission report that actually came out yesterday on recommendations on how to make changes in city government. If you guys have a chance, it's in Times Dispatch. They're talking about reducing the number of council seats, giving the mayor more power to hire a chief administrative officer. They're hopefully going to implement some changes that will be positive. I'm hopeful, but look, it's been challenging for us to get permits.
Does
It's
that
been
affect
challenging
you
for
in a
us to do.
positive way or a negative way? I mean, I don't want to put you in a.
If the mayor has if there's a better chief administrative officer that works at the city that is more effective at firing department heads, is able to hire more people, is able to staff positions better, that's always a positive thing.
Sure.
One of the things that I'm hopeful we'll see happen is somebody with a business background becomes that chief administrative officer and truly starts running the city like a business.
So it's
You know.
so it's just more efficient, right? I mean, because it's
Wait,
inefficiencies.
government
Problem.
efficient?
What I found is that I have not found anybody there to be anti-development. So we have not had any issues with projects that we propose to develop, special use permits, rezonings that we try to achieve. I mean, the people at the city, planning department, zoning, council, they've all been receptive to everything they're doing. I don't find that anybody down there is not necessarily pro-development. Where we're running into issues is simply with timelines. They're not staffed well.
Mhm.
Getting rezonings done, getting permits approved. It's been a problem for many years for everybody.
Yeah.
They just need to staff better. They need to pay people better. I think they need to cast probably a wider net when they're hiring people.
Do you
Yeah.
find it?
So
Yeah.
Do you find it, since you're a developer in Richmond, do you then get involved in inner city politics to help guide in that way?
I'm starting to become more interested in it. I'm starting to become more involved. I haven't been. I've never really had time, but I'm starting to take an interest.
Okay. Because like one thing that keeps creeping up in the city of Richmond, for the people that watch this, is this casino.
Hmm.
Keeps coming back. Like, apparently it was voted no, and then I think they tried to bring it back again, and it was voted no again. But now I just saw like on Richmond Biz Sense that
They're still like
They're still
zeroing in on
still trying to bring-
Scott's Edition.
no,
area,
it's
is it?
that
No,
Philip Morris
south side.
that Philip
Oh,
Morris
it's-
location.
Is it
Okay.
gambling laws
Yeah.
still hold up?
No,
I don't
no,
remember.
no.
No. The Richmond city residents had a referendum and they voted it down.
Mm.
Now here's the amazing thing. You know, they said we want to bring a casino to Richmond. Let's put it to the voters. Voters voted against it. And they said, okay, thanks for playing. We're going to have another referendum.
We don't like your answer.
I mean, isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
And so now I believe, and don't quote me, but I believe it's now going to come up for a referendum again.
Wow.
Oh, and
They
that's-
really want it
you
to
know.
be built.
Just put your vote into file 13.
But that's amazing how that works, right? Like, okay, well that was a practice round. Let's do it for real this time. You know, I'll tell you, I'm happy to share my opinion. I voted against it. I think it's going every job that it's going to create, and it will create a number of jobs. Every job it's going to create is going to be offset by 5 people from the immediate area that casino is located in going broke in that thing. And
Yeah.
Spending their
yeah.
paycheck
Oh yeah.
every Friday
You
or
know,
whatever.
I
it's a
have-
tax. Casinos are a tax on the poor.
Yeah, it
plain and
is.
simple.
It is.
And it's not my quote.
Yeah.
Somebody much smarter than me said it.
Yeah.
It's a tax on the poor.
It is very true. And, you know, I've been to a lot of casinos in my day. I play blackjack a lot. And so, like, I'll go to.
Are you trying to tell us something? James?
Well, you know.
James
So
doesn't
I've
gamble. I
think
I've
he's- I
discussed
think
this
he's gonna
openly.
vote
I know,
yes.
I
I've discussed openly, right?
Yeah.
So I played in Europe, right? I've
Mhm.
played in Vegas a ton, right? For
Yep.
years, I was going to Vegas, Atlantic City, and then I went to a wedding in outside of Baltimore in Maryland, right? And I went to just the local casino,
Mm-hmm.
With
and
the little MGM.
it
Was that the
is-
MGM?
it was not MGM. It was Live Maryland Casino or something up further a little bit north.
I've been there.
And here's the thing, the feeling, the difference in the feeling is palpable of people
That's
who
no
are
Vegas.
gambling in Vegas, right? Who are there because they've budgeted and they're like on vacation and they're dumping tons of money because they're having
Mhm.
fun and they're enjoying it. And sitting at a table next to somebody who clearly is like gambling away their Friday paycheck, right?
And they're stressed.
Oh
and
my
they're-
gosh, it is.
So,
Everything about that feels completely different.
So, I think it was MGM when they first opened. We went there on a Friday,
Yeah.
and I will never forget walking past the cashier line, and it was Friday around 6 p.m.
Yep.
And the people were coming straight from work, and you could tell because they were still wearing
Work
their
attire.
construction
Yeah.
attire, their work attire, postal workers,
Yeah.
and they were cashing their checks.
Man.
And that should tell you everything you need to like. When did you see that in Vegas last?
yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
It's a
yeah.
completely different animal. I mean, it
So-
is literally local people
Yep.
within driving distance coming in there to gamble their paychecks away. So sure, you created 5,000 jobs, but you've just ruined. And I'm not against gambling. I just think gambling should be done with money you can afford to spend.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So for every job you've created, you've
Yeah.
ultimately ruined how many lives?
Oh
Come,
my
you can come out
gosh.
the new kid. All the gas stations have slots machines.
Oh yeah, that's wild,
It
right? That's
is.
wild. That it's
That's
literally
totally-
now.
Well,
like,
no.
that's
They're called skill games.
skill
yeah,
games.
skill
right?
games, right?
Yes.
But I
it's
just-
the
it's
Virginia
just-
lottery.
I have a little corner mart that is right around my house, and there's the same guy there. I go and pick up, some alcohol or whatever, and check out, and the same dude every time.
Oh,
and,
gosh.
and his
He's just an
skills
old
have
guy.
not-
He's just
not
hanging
improved
out.
at all.
His skills
Talking
are
to the
not
cashiers. Yep.
Skills are just as bad as they were
Oh,
last
yeah.
week.
Oh,
It's
my
wild.
gosh.
He's gonna go, buy that $1.5 billion lottery ticket. He's already bought 4. Like,
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
man.
it's rough.
and yeah, they're gonna locate this thing in like one of the poorest areas in Richmond,
Yeah.
Petersburg.
as if they're doing them a favor.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll still vote no when it comes up for referendum a second time, and I guess if
I mean, it was
if they
pretty
don't like
sweeping.
the answer, maybe
it was a
it'll be-
pretty sweeping no, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like I don't remember.
No,
what the
no,
percentage-
it was pretty close.
was it close?
It wasn't
Okay.
sweeping. It was
Okay.
pretty close.
Yeah.
It was
okay.
pretty close.
So maybe they feel like they now have lobbied enough for it that there's enough vote to swing it the other way.
I just think almost every argument they've made for it just didn't resonate with me.
Yeah.
You know, I used to go to Atlantic City when I lived in New York. We used to go to Atlantic City to spend weekends at
Mhm.
Harris,
Mhm.
Borgata. We would drive, park in the parking garage of the casino that we were going to, spend the entire weekend in that casino, never leaving the grounds. Then we'd get back in the car. Same thing. Look, like if you go to MGM,
Yeah.
are you exploring the surrounding
Yeah.
area?
You're not going anywhere
Are
else.
you
besides-
frequenting the local businesses?
Yeah.
No.
Like you're no.
Exactly.
So like every argument that they made for this casino, oh, it's gonna help the surrounding, it's gonna create economic growth around it. No, it's not.
yeah.
People are gonna park in the garage of that casino.
And
They're
never
gonna
leave.
spend how many ever days they're gonna spend there. That's the entire point of like getting away. You don't want to like, you just want to stay there.
Yep.
They're gonna leave.
Yep.
Escapism.
Yeah, it's not gonna be a economic driver for surrounding area. It's not all of a sudden gonna blossom.
Well, and I could see you saying that in your commitment and passion to build mixed-use communities,
Yeah,
right? Or
that's where I was
like,
gonna go
you know, that experience that you're building of like, oh, somebody is, you know, living, potentially working,
Mm-hmm.
eating, dining, going out, all in one area, right?
Yeah, and that's a different story, right? Because people are living there, whether they own or rent, but they're invested in the area. They're frequenting local businesses.
Mhm.
You know that's something that, again, I think more and more people want.
Yeah.
And if you look at the development patterns, suburbia, and we were talking about that earlier, they're doing the same thing out there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
it turns
No.
into a more hyper local community versus
Yeah.
everyone commuting from suburbia that's 30, 45 minutes away. Everyone is. You see Bill at the coffee shop. He lives upstairs in Suite 320. Like,
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
becomes like this
Yeah.
actual village.
Right. I mean, not
Yeah.
everybody wants to live in a cul-de-sac or in the neighborhood. You know, like I lived in Richmond City, and we, once we started having children, we moved out to the county. But that's what I miss the most. I miss the walkability. I miss being able to
Yeah, I
walk
love
out of my door and go get a coffee.
I love
Mhm.
New Kent,
Yep.
but I hate it. I love
Mm.
having no one around me to
Land.
do whatever. But
Yeah.
sometimes at 2 in the morning when I got the munchies, I want to order some freaking Taco Bell and I can't.
So
It really sucks.
You got to drive everywhere
Yeah.
for a while.
on that note, I kind of want to shift into the Airbnb space because I have a lot of questions on that. Like, what's your opinion? Is there a bubble? Airbnb arbitrage, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So you have a few Airbnbs, but these are Airbnbs that you built from the ground up, correct?
Most of them, yeah.
Okay. Do you find more success with, because I've seen your postings on it, they're more, it's not like just an average Airbnb, it's a house and I put some furniture in it, but yours is a little bit more lavish, more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find more success?
Hotel-esque.
Yeah, more hotels type vibe. Do you find more better conversions with that?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely went for kind of a boutique hotel vibe. I mean, if you look at the finishes that we used, we hired interior designers for all the units. You know, I mean, they have nice wallpaper, beautiful tiled showers, really nice kitchens, really nice furniture. We put quite a bit of money into them, because that's kind of the vibe that we're going for. You know, is there a bubble in Airbnbs? I think it's highly dependent on where you are. I think a lot of people that get into the Airbnb game don't necessarily think through the location, take the time to properly stage their units. So I mean, is there a bubble? I don't know. There has been a growth in listings, but if you look at the market share that short-term rentals have, like what have they taken away from the hotel industry? In my view, it's still in its infancy. There's still a huge amount of travel that happens where people are booking hotels, where short-term rentals can take that market share.
Mm.
And if you're a hotel lobbyist listening to this, like, but
I doubt it.
but truly, like a lot of people will not go back to staying at hotels, right? They want to stay in a place that that's not 300 square feet, or they want a full kitchen. In our case, like we're traveling with children, we can't even stay in a hotel if we wanted to. We have 3 kids,
Mm-hmm.
so every time we're traveling somewhere, we're staying in an Airbnb, right? So
Yeah, it's relatively cheaper.
it's cheaper, and we
Convenience.
have the room to spread out. I mean, if we're staying in the hotel, we've got to get like 2 rooms
Rooms.
adjoining.
Yep.
even then, my kids are so young. I wouldn't feel comfortable even leaving them in that room. So I think there's a lot of listings out there. There's very few that compete with ours properly because we are in an incredibly walkable, amenitized location. We were very strategic about where we placed our Airbnbs, and we put quite a bit of money into them. And I think some people are jumping into it without necessarily kind of, like, why would anybody stay here?
Yeah,
And
like
you there's nothing here.
yeah.
You walk out the door and you need a bulletproof vest.
Yeah,
But like
not great.
I see that all the time.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So
sure.
location, like most things to do with real estate, location with Airbnb matters, right?
I
And-
would say even more so than with long-term rentals.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, with long-term rentals, you just have to convince one person to live there, and you've got a year-long lease.
It's gonna make
With
the
short-
body armor an amenity.
Yeah, there you go. With short-term rentals, you have to constantly, and people that are coming there are not familiar with the area,
Mm-hmm.
and so if they feel unsafe,
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about this from like a like an urban perspective for Airbnb, right? Because I mean,
Yeah.
obviously there's vacation markets
Sure.
and other places, right? But and then there's also like somebody who might buy, I'll just buy in the suburbs, a house to Airbnb. But again, why would someone stay there, right?
it doesn't- it
there's no
doesn't-
reason.
it doesn't make a lot of sense. I
Yeah.
mean, where we are, I think it works for us because we're in a location where we can host business travelers.
Mhm.
We can host people coming in for the weekend.
Yep.
For a staycation.
What part of town are you on?
Downtown in Churchill.
Okay, yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
so we're surrounded by really great food.
Mhm.
So people are coming to the area all the time just to stay there for a couple of days and just go to the restaurants
Yeah,
and go to the bakery across the street.
yeah.
So we're in a location where we can cater to, I think, a wide clientele.
Mhm.
If I have a vacation rental, it's a vacation rental.
Yeah.
And if the economy goes into a slump, people don't travel as much.
Yeah.
I'm going to feel it.
Yep.
If I'm out in short pump somewhere, I mean, who am I? I don't know.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting what you say about Airbnb bubble, just from the sense that, like anything, right? Like any bubble, right? People who are doing it really well will probably continue to do it
Mhm.
really well, and people who are doing it subpar or mediocre will probably be just destroyed, right? And I
It-
mean, there's
It's at some point, if they're smart, they're going to run the numbers and they're going to say, my average monthly income does not justify doing this. I
Yeah.
can just convert it back to a long-term rental and look, I mean, for us, our Airbnb units are profitable, but it's a lot of work. I mean, I have a full-time person on my staff in my property management company that is primarily responsible for the Airbnbs,
Mhm.
because for the 10 Airbnbs that we manage, it's probably more work than 100+ long-term rentals.
Wow.
I
Wow.
mean, we have long-term tenants, so they're great tenants.
yeah.
We don't hear from them for
S-
No news is good
6
news.
months, 9 months. I mean, unless some appliance breaks or something.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
these 10 Airbnbs you had, this is essentially a building complex. So you built this from the ground up. From a financing
Correct.
perspective, did you do private money, build it, refi, or did you do a construction loan with the bank and get them to? I'm just curious on how development
Sure.
for something like that goes.
Land was purchased in this case with cash,
Okay.
and then we got a construction loan from a bank, local community bank, and that construction loan, after the construction is complete, rolls over into permanent financing.
And then for a deal that size, what does the bank require in collateral? Is it the land, or is it just
in this case, the land was worth enough to where that served largely as the down payment
Oh,
into
wow.
the deal, and our construction loan covered 90+% of the construction.
Wow.
Wow.
Because what works really well about that strategy is that if I'm just buying a traditional property, let's say it's already an apartment building that exists, it's filled with tenants, costs me $10 million. The bank is going to say you need to bring 25% down. I need to bring $2.5 million in cash as the down payment to secure that loan. In new development, one of the advantages is, I can buy that land for $800,000 but maybe I bought it cheap. I can bring it back. I can bring it to the bank as my equity, and I can show the bank, hey, this land is worth $2.5 million. If I can actually justify that value. And now it's as if I'm bringing $2.5 million in cash to the bank, because I'm going to say this land is my down payment. That's my equity. Land, from my experience,
that's
they
work though. That's
have
you
rarely
doing
questioned what I paid for the land. They care about what the land is worth.
right.
So if I own the and it's I'm actually using this example of a deal that we're hopefully breaking ground on soon. We bought a piece of land for $830,000. Now we held it for a couple of years. It wasn't instant. It wasn't worth $2.5 million when we bought it, but held it for a few years, brought it to the bank. Its most recent appraisal is $2.6 million.
Wow.
And that's my equity for my construction loan. So that's one of the advantages of new development. I can get better leverage.
Time, but it's just time for an instance like that.
And it doesn't have to be time.
Oh.
If there's a $2.5 million piece of land, but maybe I'm really good at negotiation, or maybe I find a situation where the seller needs to get out quickly, or something where maybe it's worth $800,000. I buy it and I upzone it, where now I can put a lot more density on it.
What?
And now instantly,
Upzoning, what is that exactly?
it can be any number of things, right? It can be just a blanket rezoning, where right now it's got residential zoning or industrial. If you go out to like Chesterfield, they have M zoning, which is I believe it's agricultural, right? And I can rezone that land, and now it's some kind of high density zoning. In Richmond City, we have something called special use permits, where I'm simply getting permission to do something. Underlying land is not getting rezoned, but I'm getting permission to build something here that zoning does not allow. So for a simple example, zoning allows a single family home. I submit a set of plans and application. Now I can build a duplex here. I've just increased the value of that land. So it doesn't have to be time, but I either need to buy it cheap, or I need to upzone it, or I just need to hold it long enough to where it appreciates.
Wow. Well, I'm starting to see that it was more than you just being fortunate in 2008 and 2009 and riding the real estate. I mean, there's no doubt you have a level of expertise here that I think is critical for
A lot of
field
strategizing.
training. Yeah, no doubt.
Oh yeah.
A little bit,
Yeah.
maybe.
Well, listen, I respect the self-awareness to be like,
Yeah.
hey, you got in at a right time, right? And, some people would beat their chest over, oh, like I was an expert. I was a genius.
I
Right?
should have bought the $50 worth of Bitcoin in 2010.
That's
but
right.
I was a poor college student. I didn't. I'd be a billionaire by now.
Would have been on a yacht right now.
Yes.
No,
Wouldn't be
look,
here.
timing in real estate plays a role.
Yeah.
But when the market sucks, you can still make money. You just need to be better at identifying value,
What's
at creating value.
What's your current opinion on the real estate market? Is it still a good time to buy? Do you see happening in the next 12 to 18 months? We can get political here. Like I know you're sooner or later going to be looking to buy a house.
So I'm looking to buy a house, but the problem I'm having, right, is I'm looking for a starter home, right?
Mhm.
And high interest rate environment,
It's
people who
tough.
are in starter homes are not leaving. So
Yeah.
I'm on Zillow on a daily basis, and it's like half a dozen listings, right? Like maybe 5,
And
right,
they're
are
all
coming up.
multiple offers.
Yeah.
and
I bought
it's-
my house
Yeah.
in 2018 for like I don't know $275, and now it's worth $435.
I remember that story. You're just like, yeah, just discover you're appraised for an extra $100,000 out of nowhere.
And they didn't even come to the
even
house.
come to
Like
the house.
here's
Yeah.
an extra $100,000.
Yeah.
I'm like great.
Well, and you probably have a great mortgage, and you're not giving that up.
2.6.
Jesus.
I refi.
Yeah, I will never sell my
So-
house. 2.4.
Why?
2.5.
Why would I?
Like,
So
Well, and that's the problem now, right? I mean, you've got so many people locked into great financing. They're just not leaving.
Yeah.
free money.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of people that want to upsize their homes and want to move somewhere else, and they're just not doing it.
Yep.
And it's understandable. I mean, it's 2.6% is free money.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
So
I went from
Yeah,
4 or
probably-
5. Yeah, and I had only owned the house for 2 years, but I went from 4 or 5, and like going down to 2.6 makes sense.
Yeah.
So I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll probably add in a couple additions on my house before I do anything else.
All right.
Plus a
So
garage
and
everything else on
yeah,
there.
and a lot of people are doing that. So I mean, I do my very best not to try to forecast what happens, because I think being self-aware, I think, haven't we all learned that we can't predict anything at this point?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't know.
Everyone's like frothing at the mouth, waiting for the real estate market to crash. And it's like
No.
10 years later.
It's still there.
Still there.
I'll tell you what. I do know that it won't crash. Now, sure, like the office market is in trouble, and it's going to drag some things down with it.
Mhm.
On the residential side, we're undersupplied. Big time. We're undersupplied, right? People are not leaving their houses. There is still plenty of demand out there. Yeah, the interest rates are much higher, but if you need to buy a home, you're going to buy a home.
Yep.
You know, especially now that, like, there was a period, I think, of shock last March where rates went up so fast that people were they just could not, their brains broke. like they couldn't process, right?
Yeah.
Like, 2 months ago, rates were 2.6. Now they're 4.9, and I
Yeah.
just like, but it's been a year. People, I think, have at this point adjusted.
Mhm.
In the historical sense, the rates that we're experiencing now are not high, right? If you go back
16, 18%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, so
Versus the 70s.
people will still buy houses even if this now becomes our new normal.
Mhm.
We have a small kind of home building part of my business where we build houses and sell them, and we're building good product. We're building it in a good location,
So-
and they're selling. They're
so-
all going under contract.
Like in
Yeah.
California, they do 50-year mortgages.
Is that right?
Yeah.
I've seen people do that.
Is there-
'cause
is
I have
there-
family
is
in
there-
That's their
California?
way of trying to like combat the
I've seen.
cost.
I
I've-
once said I've seen.
I know about 40, but I didn't know about
s-
50.
I had a cousin that talked about it. I've never seen. I've heard I only heard of 40 at the time, but it says like, yeah, I got a 50-year mortgage. I'm like, the f- is that in debt for the rest of your life? I mean,
Jesus.
how else you can afford a house in California?
Yeah.
No, I'll tell you how
Actually,
you
I'm
leave.
curious.
yeah.
Yeah,
That's the
they've
only way.
all left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hold on,
Yeah, I think it's
50.
harder to come across starter homes, for yourself. I mean, you save, I'm sure, 20% off the top of everything you make. I would.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Even Lending Tree has an ad right now, 50-year mortgage rates.
oh my
That's
gosh,
I've never heard of 50 before this.
that's crazy.
But
So,
I've only
like,
heard it in California.
I know that 40 is coming back, and it's coming back also as like a way for banks to sort of cure loans that
Yeah.
are are resetting. But I've never heard of 50. That's
well,
it
bonkers.
was only California.
Well, of course.
and part of my understanding, limited understanding of 2008 was I was graduating college at the time, right? But
Mhm.
like came from The Big Short, right? The movie
Yeah.
The Big Short, right? Which I think actually did a pretty phenomenal job explaining some pretty complex financial concepts.
Does
in,
this make
like, a
sense?
simple way.
No.
If you use strippers to showcase the
Hey,
point,
you're right. You're right.
Yeah. We
Everybody
all,
will- everybody
we all
will
You'll
get
captivate
it. It's like,
attention.
oh, okay.
Captivate
Yeah.
attention. So-
Margot Robbie did a great
but-
job explaining
yes.
that.
But one of the things that I think is very true out of what you just said there, right, was the fundamental difference in 2008 was the massive oversupply, right? And it's taken like 10 years for demand and supply to kind of get back close to each other at this point, right?
Well, it was two things. There was oversupply, and there was the amount of subprime resets that were happening, right?
Yeah.
The sheer amount of subprime origination leading up to that,
Yep.
and the kinds of loans that were given out to people, no doc, no income verification, no employment verification, no credit, dangerous arms that reset now your payment tripled. I mean,
So stripper
There's-
getting 3 houses. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, listen, this is a different conversation. There are probably some strippers that could afford 3 houses, but
That's true.
Yeah.
you still got to get good loans on them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're in a different.
OF making like 10 grand a month nowadays. You can afford mansions now.
Yeah.
We're in a different market,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
The level of supply is nothing like we experienced in 2008.
Yep.
The level of subprime resets is nothing like we experienced in 2008. It's a completely, the fundamentals are completely different.
Well, yeah, because when I look at why a house right now on Zillow is, like it pops up and then all these offers are on it, right? And it's going for over asking, let's say. It makes sense to me from the fact that supply is just so low, right? And so like that's good. I mean, that seems like it makes
And-
sense with supply and
And
demand.
it's not, yeah, I mean, multifamily originations have skyrocketed,
Uh-huh.
right? So apartment building is starting to catch up, I think, to demand. I mean, there's I think Q2, don't quote me again, Q2 of 2023 saw the highest level of multifamily originations per quarter nationally in the last 50 years.
Wow.
Single family, to my knowledge, originations are not keeping up with demand.
Mm.
But people will continue to form households. People will continue getting married. They'll continue graduating from college, and so the demand will persist.
Yeah.
So anybody that's sitting around waiting for like a residential housing crash,
It's just never gonna happen.
it's not
Yeah.
not anytime soon,
Yeah.
and certainly never to a level like what we saw in 2008.
Yeah.
That's just
So-
not gonna. It's not a reality.
Do you know who Grant Cardone is?
Yeah.
Okay.
The Muffin Man.
He says, and don't quote me on this, but you should never own the real estate you live in, and don't do single family units, and only buy apartment complexes and invest in his Cardone capital.
Yeah. Invest in his.
What's your thought and opinion on that whole space? Because I know I
Not
think he's
sponsored
being,
by.
yeah, we're
Is
we're
he being
definitely not
investigated?
sponsored.
Investigated.
Well, it's
by
not
the-
public yet. It's just there's
Yeah.
enough rumors going around. Again, it's all.
I mean, there's a lot of
speculating.
rumors about him.
Scientology.
I think
Bubble Night.
he is. Yeah, it's shocking how many people don't know that
He's a
is
Scientologist?
Yeah.
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 In his book, the written book, it doesn't say it, but his audiobook, he actually adds in. He talks about the book Dianetics, which is
Yeah.
written by L. Ron Hubbard,
L. Ron Hubbard.
and he mentions it multiple times in the audiobook. And I looked it up because I didn't put two and two together. I'm like, oh, Scientology.
Hopefully,
That's how I found out.
good thing we
Interesting.
don't have as
But,
big a subscriber count. Otherwise, Scientology might come after us. for
But
this,
here's the other thing.
So you guys aren't level
My
3.
buddy,
You're not supposed to know this
I have a
knowledge.
buddy of mine who I was a big fan of Grant Cardone's books. But this is like
Yeah.
2014, before he really caught on big to.
Mhm.
Like I was really big into the entrepreneur space, as far as like entrepreneurs,
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
hustle 24/7 philosophy.
Yeah.
I had a buddy of mine down in Orlando who was a big fan of Cardone, and found out that he was going to be in Orlando, and didn't even look up the actual location he was going to be at. And Cardone showed up to speak at this event. He just waltzed right in and sat in the front row.
It was a Scientology.
It was a Scientology event.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But he's very DL about it. He doesn't really talk about it unless, I mean, I guess in the audiobook, but I mean, I've never seen anything where he mentions it or brings it up. But
There's like a quick, if you listen closely to the versions, you will hear him talk about Dianetics, Alan Hubbard, and it's very quick, and he goes straight back into the book.
Yeah.
when
Sounds like a cry for help.
from when I've always, when I found out about him, and I generally have liked most of, like, I've liked most of the stuff that he set up, and I don't really follow him much anymore.
Same.
When I found out that he was a Scientologist, I was like, okay, but like, how can I take anything he says going forward seriously?
Yeah. Yeah.
Aliens.
Credibility.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
well, the U.S. government said aliens exist now, so
Yeah.
he may be
We've
correct.
known this since the 80s.
I
zero.
just at that point I
not
just
two.
kind of tuned out.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, should you only buy apartment buildings? Yeah, apartment buildings are more efficient from a management standpoint, from an ownership standpoint. Should you not buy single family rentals? Well, a lot of people, that's their only entry point into the market. That's how they started. That's how I started. That's how a lot of people I know started. It's easy to say, well, you just go buy an apartment building, but not everybody can.
Yeah. Yeah.
You buy a couple of single family rentals, you get experience managing those rentals. You start small. There's nothing wrong with that.
I agree.
Is it scalable to have hundreds and hundreds of single family rentals? No, it sounds like a nightmare. I would not advocate that. I think to scale your portfolio to any decent size, you want to move into multifamily. But I'm not a fan of absolutist statements.
Exactly. That's what I was about
Not-
to say. Yeah.
I'm just
it's-
not. I'm not a fan of
it's
that.
like-
It's they're catchy, and they produce headlines and
Yeah.
get people talking, but they rarely work for everyone.
Like the 5-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss.
Well,
a lot of great, the 4-Hour Work Week.
yeah.
A lot of great
Yeah.
philosophies. I've already
Because you
forgotten.
know what's better than
I
5-hour
had
work week?
3.
4 hour. What about
I'll go-
3 and a half?
I'll go to 3.
yeah.
Yeah. It was
So-
actually very impactful on me when I got laid off from my job. That's how
Yeah.
I started my internet business. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot. Changing subjects, but what that book teaches, there's a lot of practical stuff in there. But
Right.
like the 4, like I work more hours now than when I did on Wall Street. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
the whole 4-hour work week thing is
Yeah.
is a crock of shit.
Well,
Oh,
and see, this is the thing,
Basically.
right? When somebody moves from, like offering business advice to now influencer business advice,
mhm.
it's exactly what you're describing, right? It's the move to these absolutist statements about you
10x.
got to do this, you got to
Just
do this.
10x it all.
Because it's about attention, right? And
Yeah.
it's like if you can get attention, then you're winning. And that's the problem, my understanding anyways, of the SEC.
Well, it was because getting unaccredited investors under
Yes.
to invest into this thing. It's like
and
that.
you're trading the equity, your
That was
name
the big thing.
recognition. Yeah, you're trading your name recognition to essentially, I would go as far as to say dupe young people who don't know what they're doing, right? Who might have less than
getting
$1,000
sued
in
by
the bank
people
account.
that invest in his multifamily funds.
So the thinking here, right? And I'm not 100% sure if this is confirmed or not, but I've heard rumors that he was getting investigated by the SEC.
Yeah.
for-
So again, I can neither confirm nor deny as far as the whole knowledge of that. But like
Yeah.
it's like because you see some of the videos, like there was one with him and Don Lemon, and Grant was like,
oh
Don,
no, it was Damon.
Damien,
that was Don Lemon.
not Don
Yeah,
Lemon.
yeah.
Wrong.
He's like,
I have a headache.
yeah.
The guy from Shark Tank.
Damon.
Damon John.
Damon John.
Damon John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was on doing a show, and he was like, asked Damon John, if you were down to your last $1,000, what would you do? And Damon John was like, I would buy this course. And you're like, what?
What? It's like you're telling somebody down to their
The
last
last
$1,000 they
$1,000
should buy some course. What the heck?
There was
is
a
that?
clip. There was a
Or course or invest or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
there was a clip where he was interviewed by Jordan Belfort,
Mhm.
When they
the
got
Wolf
into
of
it.
Wall
Oh,
Street,
yeah.
who was a world-class scumbag.
Yes.
You know, it's like, hey, I'm gonna dupe lower to middle-class Americans out of their retirement savings, go to prison, and then I'm going to become a guru when they get out of prison. And people love the guy.
Yeah.
Well, it's
yeah.
like, he is a scumbag.
yeah.
But that's a different.
It's because of Leonardo DiCaprio. That's why.
Yeah, but don't let me go off on a tangent.
We do that all the time.
But there was a great clip where he was interviewing Cardone, and he was like, and Cardone was telling him some story about how he drove past some apartment building, and it was on the market, and Cardone is like, yeah, I called my guy. I said, listen, oh no, it wasn't even in the market. He wanted to buy this building. And Cardone was like, yeah, I called my guy, and I was like, hey, call this owner, give him, tell him we'll pay him anything he wants. The guy was like, anything he wants. He's like, yeah, because like I know the number. He's like, do you want me to run the numbers? He's like, no, I know the numbers are gonna work. If it's in the market, like if it's for sale, then the numbers have to work. It was just complete freaking nonsense. Like and so if that's how he buys his buildings.
Yeah.
I don't know
It's
the numbers
highly
in these
doubtful.
deals, but like he's definitely paid.
Well, you're not doing
Top
a service
dollar
to your
for-
investors if that is the case.
Well, yeah. Well, and Belfort, like, if a guy like you that is
Belfort's
calling you
you
on
out?
your BS, then
I
there's a
mean,
problem,
Look
right?
look up this clip on YouTube because it's incredible. He was like, "Well, I don't need to see the numbers. I know the numbers. The numbers have to work. If the deal, if there's a price and it's on the market and the guy wants to sell it, then the numbers. What? That's not how it works.
Math
Yeah.
is not mathing.
So, so
So
essentially, there's no need to have the absolutist way when it comes to real estate. That was my whole point with bringing Grant Cardone up because he has that philosophy. He's
yeah.
like, don't live in the home, don't
Don't
'Cause
own where you live.
don't own where you
and
live.
only own where you're
I'm
renting
always
out,
always
you know.
confused by that.
It's-
by
That's
that
what the
philosophy.
majority of Americans do. They buy their starter home,
But then
you
I-
usually flip it in the home you're
I see
in, and
so
then you
many successful people that are multimillionaires that live and own the home that they live in.
Yep.
But he lives in downtown Miami in a high skyrise, and he's paying
well,
out the
but he
wazoo
also
for
bought
it.
like a $80 million Malibu beach house, and
Right.
so he doesn't practice what he preaches.
He spent $100,000 on a door on his new private jet.
He doesn't follow the rules because he doesn't have to. He writes them.
Right. I mean, like a jet is a bigger liability than a home. I think everything is much more nuanced, right? I think,
For clicks.
Absolutely.
but on the flip side, right, the belief that your home is an asset
Mhm.
is also an absolutist statement that is often wrong,
Yeah.
right? If you overpay for your house, if you own your house in a negative price environment, if your house comes with a ton of maintenance and you're just constantly spending money on it, in reality, to me, an asset is something that produces income.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, no, your home, I don't believe that your home is an asset,
Mhm.
even if you're building some equity in it.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't produce income. But should you not own a home? No, I wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
It's still, for most American families, it's one of the main ways that they have access to build wealth.
Yep.
'Cause I could get a HELOC loan on my house, and I could use that money or as a down payment in a way. So let's say, take me as an example. So I have this house. I bought it for $274. I owe, I think, maybe $210 on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth like $430. And I wanted to say build an Airbnb or buy another house and renovate it. What's a way I could do from a financing standpoint without using someone else's money? Is there a way? Like, could I get a HELOC loan on my? Is that the smart way to do it? I'm talking like an idiot here.
a second position HELOC would probably have to come from the same lender that gave you the first mortgage,
Okay.
I would think.
Is that smart to do that? Is that safe?
I think credit lines should only be used. I think short-term financing methods should only be used for very short-term things. Where people get in trouble is they take short-term money, and short-term money is typically more expensive, and it's typically due a lot sooner, and they use it for long-term projects. So, can you tap into your HELOC? Yeah, but you'd better have a plan to pay that HELOC off fairly fast. So build your AirbnBs and refinance them, for example.
What does
Or-
HELOC stand for?
Home equity line of credit. So as long as you have a good plan to pay that money off fairly quickly, then I don't necessarily see anything wrong with that strategy.
Would you recommend then do more focused on private money then for, say, buying rental properties?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of it out there. There's a lot of it that still wants to be put to work.
I'm just talking for the people listening. 'Cause
Yeah.
I did it with the former business partner I had on a few flips. We just flipped. We didn't buy and hold, but we used private money. She gave us money for purchase the property and for the rehab, short term with interest.
Mhm.
And then, I mean, again, this was at the top of the market when everything was selling like that.
What were you paying her?
I don't know. I'll let my other business partner deal with that money aspect to the top of my head, but I think it was like 8% was,
It's not bad.
it wasn't terrible. But like one house we bought for like 125, I think we put 95 into it. This was like our first full flip. Probably could have saved maybe 15 to 20K if we were like
Mm-hmm.
pros and we've done like a few more flips.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
the process of doing business, but
you still made money.
the house was listed at 325 but sold for 360.
You gotta love this market.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
and it sold in 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
So
You paid her off. She was happy. She was probably ready to do it again.
oh yeah, and she did. Yeah, she was definitely ready to do it again. No, she did do it again. We did another property in Charlottesville. That property went live right when that spigot turned off.
Mm.
So that was on the market though for like 2 to 3 months. It didn't sell as fast, mostly due to a crappy realtor. Just had to be on them to do their job. But It's still sold, and we still made money. But yeah, so having that private money lender made things easier and less like stressful because I'm not using personal cash to do it.
And
But
just making sure that you're the way you structure your agreement with your private money lender gives you extension. There's
Right.
not an absolute balloon there after 12 months. So if the market works against you, you have some extra time to sell the house, pay them off. So I mean, just make sure your notes are structured properly. But private money is a great way to get in the game.
that's the way we did it.
Yeah, I mean, borrowing against your personal residence comes with its own risks. So, do that carefully, I would say.
So takeaways from this. So I'm hearing, obviously timing, any kind of understanding of timing in the market is hard to predict, right? So it's more about making sound investment decisions with the information you have at hand, right? And I'm hearing. I mean, it sounds like you're of the belief that this trend towards, and again, we're not predicting the future here, right? But this trend towards this, multi-use community, right, seems to be, and I think what you're saying about hotels makes a ton of sense because I think about just being, an older millennial, right, but a millennial, and how many of people my age and younger don't even consider looking up a hotel in a local city or consider looking up a hotel going somewhere because they've just always done Airbnb, right?
And
That's
it's
just what it
it's
is.
cheaper,
Yeah.
right? It's generally much more cost effective.
Yep.
So I mean, think about what happens in a down economy,
Mm-hmm.
right? Airbnbs are only going to do better
Yeah.
because more people need affordable places to stay.
Well, and even like in like quote unquote resort areas, right?
Mhm.
You consider if it's like a drivable resort area. I mean, over the course of 2020, everything that happened in 2020,
Yeah.
those drivable resort areas did really great, right? Considering like, people weren't going to the Caribbean or they
Correct.
weren't going anywhere else, right? So,
I mean, that's what we saw locally.
yeah.
People that had plans to fly to Bermuda
Mm-hmm.
or Europe, now all of a sudden they couldn't, but they could still drive,
Yep.
have a weekend away somewhere. And so,
Yeah.
I think everything is moving in that direction.
Really interesting. Well, any other thoughts before we wrap here?
No, I feel like we could talk a lot more and go deep. So
Yeah,
again,
this
thank
is-
you for coming on to the
Yeah.
podcast.
My pleasure.
I know we tried it for like last month, but you were in Paris.
Yeah, we were away for a little bit.
Yeah,
Nice.
So-
you were in Paris right when all that stuff was going down. Actually, I'm curious, how was that?
We actually missed the riots by I think 3 days.
Oh,
Wow.
So we were in Paris, then we were in Bordeaux, and then we flew back, and I think like that kid got shot, and the riots happened. I think 3 days after we left.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
So
it's all
so
about
we
timing.
missed- It's all about timing.
It's all about timing.
And again, I wish I could foresee it, but we
Yeah.
just got lucky. So
Yeah.
we didn't have any travel interruptions, but
yeah.
um,
Bordeaux, you had some wine over there, huh?
just a little bit.
Yeah.
But man, I tell you, their wine is just so much cleaner than ours.
Yeah.
They don't use preservatives.
Yep.
Sulfites.
Everything is cleaner.
I swear,
It's-
in all the
bread,
times.
bread is oh my god, like
Oh yeah.
bread is so much better.
I swear that every time I've been to Europe, right? I've been a bunch of times. I've never gotten a hangover in Europe ever.
Yeah.
Now I don't know if that's like the adrenaline of like being on
No,
vacation
no,
or
it's,
something.
It's
but-
literally it's cleaner
Mhm.
wine.
Yeah.
I doubt their liquor is cleaner, but I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, we drink wine every night.
Yeah.
Woke up the next day. Let's.
Yeah, same
Felt
thing for
great.
me in Korea.
Yeah.
It was
Go do it again.
yeah. American stuff is just dirty. Well, I mean, it's true. Like the laws in Europe are far more stringent when it comes to food quality.
Oh yeah.
So
but though, when I was speaking with Laura, a client of ours, big food procurement provider, she says she'll never eat meat outside the United States at a restaurant
Why
because
is
she's
that?
seen the way it's prepared.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. I think though Europe though compared to other, I mean there are other countries in
she
the
says
world.
especially Europe.
Interesting.
did she say what it was?
She didn't. I didn't go down to the specifics.
Yeah.
But she's a professional culinary chef.
Yeah.
Really good at what she does, and she says when she travels, she tries to avoid as much meat as possible, even at some of these. Granted, if it's like a 5-star like Michelin restaurant, it's different. But some of these places that are well vetted, you just gotta be. She's just like, you gotta be careful.
Not now you got me paranoid, and I don't know like
I think you're fine.
what to be afraid of. So
But
There's
the way,
always something to be
Yeah.
afraid of.
it
right?
just says anytime going outside the United States when it comes to meat, it's just
Yeah.
you have to be careful.
Yeah.
So
Well, you have to be careful inside the United States. You've seen like
that's more
Bar
so
Rescue
well,
and
well,
other
food-
places.
There's that, but
right?
like when it comes to food in the United States, I would say more so with food trucks
Yeah.
than it is with restaurants.
Yeah.
Especially in California, there's a huge issue where illegal meat is being smuggled across from Mexico
Mm.
and being used in food trucks all over because it's just cheaper. But like tapeworm,
Yeah, those tacos
whatever.
probably slap though.
I'm
ugh.
sure they do, but you're not going to agree with it probably later.
Well, you
So.
just gave us reason number 737 not to go to California.
California.
So
I was born in California, but I was raised here, so I have
Yeah.
no intention to ever go back.
we won't hold it against you.
Yeah, no. So, again, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure.
This is the thank you again for listening to the Think Fresh Move Forward podcast. See you next week.